Welcome to What's Going On, the weekly podcast and videocast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Going On. I'm Pastor Katie here at First United Methodist, and I'm glad you could join me for this episode. I want to get a few housekeeping things sort of out of the way before we dive into today's topic. The first is Happy Lent. Yesterday was Ash Wednesday, which is the official kickoff of the season of Lent. The season of Lent is a season of preparation. We talked a lot about this last week, but I hope that you have a fruitful and productive Lent this year. Just a reminder that we are going to be doing a series called Everything in Between, and it comes with a devotional that is free to you if you would like. Just let us know in the church office and we can make you one, and we'll have a couple maybe available Sunday after worship. So just wanted to point that out. Our Tuesday lunch study is going to be wrapping up their series on the Psalms. We have one more session on the Psalms, and then there's a week off at the beginning of March because I have one more work trip to do, and that is out to the Black Hills. I am helping to lead our Clergy Leadership Academy here in the Dakotas Conference. It's part of my work on the Board of Ordained Ministry, and so I will be out there with some of my clergy colleagues for that event. And so starting March 10th, I believe, let me make sure I have that right, we are going to be doing a new Tuesday lunch study series. And this series is called To Be Made Well, and it is Healing Stories in the Gospels. This is found on our Amplify Media on the Dakotas page, and the videos we're going to be watching are actually videos from Dakotas people. Some of them are cabinet members, some of them are clergy from the Dakotas. And this is going to be kind of a Lenten series that is happening across the Dakotas. We're going to come to it a couple weeks late because of the timing, and all the trips I've done always seem to land on Tuesdays. But we decided in our discussion on Psalm 90 that we shouldn't be so bound by time. And so we're going to be going through that. So you're invited to come Tuesdays at noon starting March 10th if you would like to join us for that series on the healing stories in the Gospels to be made well. So I wanted you to be aware of that. I haven't decided yet on a new Pastor Book Club book. I'm definitely wanting to do something a little bit lighter because Bonhoeffer is so dense and heavy and good, and it's been incredible to be reading that. It's been very inspiring for me as a preacher and as a person. But I kind of like to balance things out a little bit. I've been toying with the idea of the book A Year of Biblical Womanhood by Rachel Held Evans, which is like almost 15 years old now, but just such a good book and easier to read and entertaining, but also thought-provoking. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, you can comment below, be like, yeah, pick that one, or no, I've got a great idea, do this one. That would be helpful to me, actually. I would appreciate that as we kind of look to the month of March for that. So let's talk about the big news. This past Sunday in worship, I announced that I have received a new appointment starting this summer. So I will be appointed to Asbury United Methodist Church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so not too far away, actually. And my start date, as with everybody, is July 1st. And so my family and I will be moving up in that area sometime in June. I want to talk a little bit about kind of our process and how things work and how things came to be and what processes and happening now, just so that you get kind of an understanding, and hopefully it can answer any questions you might have or alleviate any anxieties you might have, because it is a hard thing to go through change and transition, and I understand that. And so let's talk about it. That's my point. So in the United Methodist Church, all of our ordained clergy, one of the vows that we take is called a vow of itinerancy. And what we mean by that is basically the promise to go where you're sent. We do not operate on a call system where individual churches look at a bunch of pastors and then call a pastor after doing kind of an extensive interview process. Rather, we have the bishop and the cabinet, and the cabinet is made up of the conference superintendents. You might notice that I'm trying to change my language from district superintendent to conference superintendent. And the reason I'm doing that is because we have 4 districts and 3 superintendents. And so they cover more than just one district. And so now we're starting to call them conference superintendents. So it is the bishop, along with the 3 conference superintendents, who make the appointments for our conference in North and South Dakota. We're the Dakotas Conference. And so that process usually begins, well, at the end of the year. So in like November or so, every SPPRC, Staff Parish Relations Committee, has to turn in a form to the conference office. It's called the Stay Move form. And that form is basically, do you want your pastor to stay, or are you ready for a new pastor? Do you want your pastor to leave? So every church has the opportunity to kind of share that information with the cabinet, with the conference. And there's a lot of like things of like, this is why things are going well. This is what we are doing, all of that stuff. So there's a lot of information that is always gathered in this process, and that happens every year. Pastors also submit a stay move form, and so a pastor can request to stay or to move, and kind of give some reasons missionally why that is. Now, if a pastor and a church have both requested that the pastor stay, that's not a guarantee that they're going to stay. It is just saying, this is a good fit and it can continue to be a good fit. What's probably more immediate is if one of those 2 parties requests a move. I have in my life requested a move one time, and that was when I left Mitchell. And the reason that I requested a move that year was because I was getting married and I needed to be closer to Sioux Falls, because at that point Jason was working in Sioux Falls. And so he needed to be closer than an hour away for travel time. And so I said I would really like to move and to be within driving distance of Sioux Falls if possible. And so that's a good reason. If things cease to be a good fit, that happens. So there's different reasons why people might request a move on either side. The other reason that the pulpits become open is retirements. And so when our pastors reach retirement age or are ready to retire, they've been serving in a church, and then that church needs to get filled. That is what I am following, is a retirement. And so at Asbury, Reverend Kip Rosen has been there for like 18, 19 years, which is pretty incredible. He grew up in the Gayville area, so he's kind of a local boy. He's, anyway. And so that appointment became open. And so at the end of the year, they do list out and send out a list of all what they call clear opens. And they actually do it for both the Dakotas and Minnesota because we share a bishop. And so it's a little bit easier to go across those conference lines because the bishop knows you and knows the churches on both sides. And so that was one of the clear opens. It's ones that we know because of retirements that appointment is going to need to get filled. And then those are often the first ones to get filled, right? Because we already know that we have to fill them somehow. And so we had 2 clear opens, well, more than that, in the conference that were due to retirements. And so far, there's the ones that have been dealt with in appointment season are those. Jamestown First has had their new appointment announced because Marty Tupke Floyd is retiring. And then now Asbury has had their appointment announced because Kip Rosen is retiring. And so that's part of the reason it's so early in the process. The cabinet starts their deliberations really in January. That's when we kind of joke that appointment season begins. And appointment season runs all spring and can run all the way until annual conference. They don't like doing that, but that sometimes is what happens. It used to be back in the day, and you can visit with Carl Watkins in our church about this because he's retired clergy, as well as Vivian Van Nessen used to be married to a clergy person, and so she's experienced this as well. Um, they didn't know where they were moving until annual conference, which is the beginning of June. And then it would be like, in 2 weeks, you're moving. Like they had no warning. And they were moving every like 3 years. And so it's different now where appointments are longer. We have more warning of typically, I should say, that we're moving, especially if you are early on in the process. And we are very early on in the appointment process because, again, where I'm going was one that was known to be open because of a retirement. So how does this work? So one, I've told you about kind of every year, both the pastor and the church gets a sense, do you want to stay? Do you want to move? Pastors are also doing, applying for retirement and stuff. So we know when those things happen. And then once the cabinet is like discerning who do we send here, they work with the leadership of that church. Again, it's typically the staff pastor parish relations committee. That is part of our leadership team. And they're talking to the church about what are you doing as a church? What are, kind of specific things that you need in a pastor and a leader? What kind of things really matter to you? What is the personality of the church? All those things, and kind of putting together a sort of profile of what would be a good fit. And then married that with what does the cabinet and the bishop already know about that church, and who they have available. And so then that discernment process begins, and they kind of prayerfully come up with a name that they feel is the best missional fit for that appointment. And hopefully that person is someone who is truly itinerant. We have a lot of clergy that are not fully itinerant, I would say. They have a vow of itinerancy, but it's complicated, is the best way to put that. And a lot of that comes down to economic needs. It used to be back in the day that you had your clergy person and their spouse was like a bonus clergy person. Like their job usually was tied to the church as well, or they didn't work, and the clergy person's job took precedence. In today's world and economy, it's very difficult to live on one salary, let alone a clergy person's salary. We're not known to make the big bucks. I mean, most of us are not in it for that. I would hope to say all of us, but I can't say that in good faith. And so there is considerations around, is this a location that my spouse can find a job, get a job, that kind of thing. There's considerations around family needs, if there is shared custody of children, or sometimes you have people who are taking care of elderly parents, or different things that kind of tie them to a certain area. We have some clergy people who, married people who are tied to the land, ranchers and farmers and things like that. Makes it difficult for them to up and move. And so we do have some of that happening in our conference. We also have people who literally just moved, and we're not going to move someone who just moved, right? So if they moved last year, they're probably not in the consideration for who is going to be the best missional fit moving forward for whatever is open. Once they do that, then the conference superintendent of wherever that appointment is calls the clergy person and says, this is an appointment call. We'd like to send you here. And so I received that call toward the end of January saying that we would like to send you to Asbury. Now, at that point, the clergy person has like a 24-hour window to really prayerfully consider the idea of moving, because again, not every clergy person has requested to move. Some have, and they're like, yeah, get me out of here. And others are, is this the right thing, the right fit, the right time, all of that. And so for me, that was talking to my husband and really talking through what that would be, what that would mean, what that would look like, what the hopes are. And we said, yeah, we're open to this. Um, and so then the next step is to schedule what they call an introduction. It's not an interview in the same way because an interview sort of seems that it's still pretty open, where an introduction is like, this is it, unless there's some major red flag. And so that introduction happened a week ago. Up in Sioux Falls, I met with some of the leadership of Asbury Church, and we got to ask each other lots of questions, talk through some logistical things, just get to the point for them to get to know me, for me to get to know them and the church a little bit more. I mean, I did some research. That's one of the great things about today is there's a lot of research you can do on churches, thanks to the internet. And so we visited, and then after that, that same night, the conference superintendent checks in with both sides and says, do you think this is a good fit? And if that's the case, then the appointment it will happen. And so then that same night, we talked about communication plan. And so that's when I found out that I will need to tell the church on Sunday. And so we made a plan, and so we tried to make it so that both churches were hearing about the same time, because again, with technology, news can travel very fast. And we want to always be able to communicate the best we can. And you deserve to hear things from me, just as Asbury deserves to hear it from their people. So, and then I sent out an email later Sunday evening. You're watching this. So we try to have it out in a variety of ways. And again, word travels. This is big news. Um, and so Asbury now knows who their next pastor will be. And I will, before heading there, have some time that I will set aside to visit with leadership and help make some plans and things like that to be ready to serve there starting this summer. But my primary focus is still here. I am still appointed here through June. And so all the things that I've committed to up until this point are things that I'm going to be doing while I'm here. And that's important to me that that my number one focus right now is still Yankton. Yes, I have things that I have to manage and do, and we'll have to start packing and all of that, but I'm not checking out of my job for the next 3 months. There's work to be done. There are exciting things happening. We're launching a new service. All of that is still happening, and I'm still excited about it. And I'm still, I think even more feel like this is the right thing, that God is doing something new and big here. And so, but what does that look like now for Yankton, right? So we are now in a situation where, Asbury had known for a while that they were going to be getting a new pastor, and they now know who their pastor is. Now Yankton knows that their pastor is leaving, but now you're in the tension of the time of, but we don't know what's coming next, right? And so how does that work? What does that look like? So the conference superintendent is going to go through that same process with the leadership team here that he did with the leadership team in Asbury, working on talking about what is important to this church. What is this church like? What kind of expectations are around the pastor? What qualities are important? What do you need moving forward? So like one, I think, interesting piece is we're launching this new modern worship service. It might be very helpful to have a pastor who has some experience in doing that in this type of service. That's actually not a strength of mine because I've never done a modern service in that way before. And so that would be an example of what that might look like, looking into the future, next steps, and who's going to be the right fit for that. And so they will work with Brandon. Brandon's the superintendent. Brandon and the cabinet will then discern based on, again, who is available, who is the right fit missionally, who is ready to move, all of those pieces. And then And then they will call that person. That person will have initial discernment, and then they will set up an introduction. And at the introduction, the new pastor will come to meet with the leadership team. And then at that point, they would also get to tour the parsonage. So I have reminded my SPR team that I need like a 2-day notice of when that meeting is happening so that I can declutter my house as best as possible. I do have 3 small children, but I want them to see the house well. So, and then if that all goes well, then the following Sunday it will be announced in church. I do not get to know ahead of time. The first, when I knew who was following me in my last appointment is when they showed up at my house to tour the parsonage. And so, uh, again, part of the reason for that is that that's not my discernment. That's not my journey. That is this church discerning their next steps with the leadership of the conference. And I need to allow for that to happen. And that'll be true again as we get closer to the summer and to that transition of really we'll do some events around being able to kind of wrap up this season and this chapter so we can enter you can enter into a new chapter well and I can enter into a new chapter well. And so be looking for those things as they come. It's important to recognize and be grateful for all that God has done, but to remember that just as God has been faithful, God continues to be faithful. And again, I couldn't be more grateful. Many of you know that my time here in Yankton started in the worst possible time it could start in COVID and then walking through disaffiliation season. I've done all of that here. Um, I look back on this 6 years and I think this has been an incredible season of growth for me as a pastor, as a leader, as a person. We added to my family during this time. When we came, we didn't have Abigail, and now we do. And I feel like I'm walking away from disappointment, having grown so much as a person. And I'm grateful for the ways that God has been at work, not only in me, but in ministry here in the church. I feel like this church has really grown, and I feel like people have really stepped into the mission and purpose of who we are and really taken on the ministry of the church in a way that is super powerful and healthy. I feel like as I walk away, there's nothing in particular that's going to just fall apart because it's not been me doing it. It's been me helping you to do it and then kind of backing out and going, see, you've got this, you can do it. Like it's almost like, when you're teaching your kids to walk and you kind of right away you're doing a lot of the work and you're right there with them and helping them and guiding them, but pretty soon they're walking on their own and then they're running and then they're running away from you, like but that's how I feel of so much of what we've done together has been you all taking the initiative and taking the spirit and running with it and dreaming and going, why can't we do this? Why couldn't we do something like this? Like, yeah, let's give it a try. Not everything has worked, but it's amazing what has and what has grown and the community that has come from that and the support systems you have in place for each other. I feel really strongly that this is a wonderful church and a healthy community. And I would be very proud to pass the reins on to any one of my colleagues and say, love them because I know that you will, and they're going to love and treat you well because that's who they are. And so, um, again, while it wasn't something I expected, I am very much at peace with um, this transition. I really believe this is God's doing. I really believe that this is God's timing. And I hope that you can see that as well. Um, Again, I will always hold a special place in my heart for this church and the people here. And again, this time of incredible growth and insight. And I know I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for all of you. And so for that, I can never say thank you enough. And before I get too bubbly and blubbery, I'm going to stop talking about that because, again, I'm still here, and we've got some things to do in the meantime. And the big thing that I would love for you to help me with, promote the Living Light service, especially if you have connections to young people, to college age kids, if you know of people in your life who are searching for a church home and maybe they like modern music, but they don't want the messages that sometimes go along with that style of worship. We're really hoping to, I think, meet a need that is going unmet right now in a lot of ways. And the other thing that we're doing is offering it on Sunday nights because there are so many who are out of town or who are busy on Sunday mornings due to no fault of their own. This gives them another option that is just not really around, to still be able to start your week with the Lord. And so invite, share. It's on Facebook. We have a event. We've got a Facebook page for it. It's going to be the same sermons as on Sunday mornings, just a different style of service. And so we really hope that it is something that can grow and become something of really helping people meet a need, to find a spiritual home with us. So with that, I love you all. And I look forward to how God is going to take you on your next chapter of this journey. Until next time, God bless. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Going On, a video and audio podcast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. We'd love to have you join us for worship on Sundays at 10 a.m., either in person or via our live stream, which can be found at our website, www.firstumcyankton.org, or by searching First UMC Yankton on YouTube.